And Dr. Uzi Rubin joins us via Skype from Israel for more in this developing story. Now, Dr. Rubin needs no introduction, but for those of you who may not know him, Dr. Rubin is an expert on missile defense. He is the founder and first director of the Israel Missile Defense Organization in the Israel Ministry of Defense between 1991 and 1999, which developed, produced and deployed the country's first national defense shield, the Arrow missile. Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One. Let me begin by asking you about your first thoughts on India's Chandrayaan-2 mission. We have lost communication with the lander, but your thoughts on how it has developed over the last few hours.
Well, let me say first that this was a very complex mission. It's a bit of a letdown that it didn't end as planned. But this is part of life. Space research is very, very complex. And a mission to the moon with a moon lander and a moon vehicle is outstandingly complex. And there are so many reasons to fail. So I think that just bringing an orbiter, which will stay there, it's a success by itself. But I'm familiar with that, with our space programs are strewn with carcasses of the missiles or the rockets that failed. This is part of the way, and one should not lose hope and forge forward. As I say, if you don't make it once, try again.
Indeed. Dr. Rubin, you describe it as a very complex mission, understandably so. But explain to our viewers who might not be familiar with the space technology and such space missions, what happens in those last few minutes as the orbiter is descending on the moon's surface. How difficult is those last few moments, really speaking?
Well, this is the critical moment. Actually, 90% of the problem happens in the 1% of the last 1% of the mission. And I should remind your listeners and viewers that missions to the moon were failed. Usually, when they fail also to Mars at this point in the trajectory. One example is a Russian moon lander that was supposed to land a few hours before the Apollo astronauts first landed there. It failed because of an altimeter, a radio altimeter that was faulty, and measured, gave a wrong reading of the altitude above the moon, and because of that, instead of landing, it hit a hill. Unfortunately, our own moon lander last year, the Bereshit, failed exactly for the same reason, the last minute of descent. So this is a very common mode of failure. It happens. I'm not sure, of course, and nobody knows yet what happened in India's moon lander. But I say that failure in these critical moments is usually when they fail there.
Indeed, and since you mentioned about Israel's lunar mission in April this year, what are the learnings for Israel from that mission of Israel?
Well, it was first, to land on the moon, you need really this first and foremost economical. You need a lot of economical power behind it. Our effort was not exactly our effort. It was a private venture with the money used from donations. It wasn't a government effort. Actually, the rocket that lifted our moon lander was an American rocket, not an Israeli rocket. So it was kind of a high-tech experiment. The Indians' effort is, of course, a government effort, much more resources behind it. And because of that, I'm sure that Indian scientists, and India is a space power, is a major space power. I'm an admiring follower of the Indian space program. I'm sure that they will either find the fault or do the second procedure. If you don't find the fault, what you do is you chart out all the possible fault methods or fault channels, and you actually fortify your system against each and one of them. And eventually, if you follow these methods, you succeed.
Right. Dr. Rubin, do stay on. I want to inform our viewers of another aspect of India's lunar mission. Now, the final moments of the Chandrayaan-2 landing on the south pole of the moon were extremely crucial. Now, as K. Shivan, the chief of Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, said before, these were the terrifying 15 minutes. Now, after the rough braking phase, ISRO lost communication with the Vikram lander. K. Shivan said that the last communication from the lander came in at an altitude of 2.1 kilometers from the surface of the moon. ISRO is now analyzing the data.
Vikram lander descent was as planned and normal performance was observed up to an altitude of 2.1 kilometer. Subsequently, the communications from the lander to ground station was lost.
Now, unlike Chandrayaan-1, Chandrayaan-2 aimed to land on the unexplored side of the moon. Soon after ISRO lost communication with the lander, Prime Minister Narendra Modi sounded a word of encouragement for the scientists. He congratulated the scientists and reiterated that this mission is already a major achievement. He encouraged the scientists to take it in their stride and asked them to remain courageous. All right, if I can go back to my guest, Dr. Uzi Rubin, one more time on this discussion. Dr. Rubin is joining us from Israel. Dr. Rubin, let's talk a bit about the Indian missions as compared to other missions around the world, including Israel's. Let's talk about cost effectiveness now. What can you tell us about the Israeli mission of April 2019, how it compares with other space missions, including those of the US? And where does you think there's scope for collaboration between India and Israel on space applications going forward as well?
Well, there is a lot. First, let me say that the Indian mission was as complex as any mission of the US, Russia, or China, as complex as theirs. And each mission has its own prospects of success and failure. One shouldn't lose heart. About cooperation between Israel and India, there is a deep cooperation between Israel and India in all various areas of economy, technology, peaceful technology, and military technology. Of course, one cannot speak very freely about military technology, but there is ongoing and very deep cooperation. I'm not sure whether there is a cooperation now on space. India was ready and it orbited one of our satellites a few years back. I think that India is, let me say, well, I should look at it with the right attitude of humility. India is today much further ahead of Israel in space sciences. It is now in first line together with major powers. Israel is usually basically in the space for military purposes, not for scientific purposes. We simply don't have the means for that. And if India will see it suitable to ask for Israeli cooperation in her peaceful scientific space program, I'm sure that Israeli scientists will be glad to do so.
Right, and one last question, Dr. Rubin. Many people around the world speak of space as the new frontier. Now, at the same time, there are fears of militarization of space. Now, we've seen some countries around the world, including India, respond to China's anti-satellite test. So, how credible are these fears, and what can the world together do to avoid the militarization of space going forward?
Well, I'm not sure. Militarization of space, it depends how you defend it. If you're talking about military system in space, it's there since 1958 already. The first Sputnik went up, although Sputnik was just a simple reconnaissance satellite, but basically it started a trend to spy from space, or to reconnaissance from space, and that's a military mission. It's now also a civilian mission. So space is militarized to some extent. The thing to avoid is fighting in space, not just being in space with military system, but military system fighting each other. I think there are a lot of, there are some international understandings or treaties against that, and one should abide the treaties. That's it.
All right, on that note, Dr. Uzi Rubin, thank you so much for sharing your insights into space technology and applications of space, especially in light of India's Chandrayaan-2 mission. Thank you so much once again. Appreciate it.